So, Dr. Cooper, tell us again what the impetus was for this top 10 list of things we can do for our metabolism.
We know how people feel so helpless that there's nothing that they can do to make anything change with their metabolism. And I know how stubborn metabolism and metabolic dysfunction is, so I get that. But we wanted people to at least feel some hope that there are some strategies that do strengthen our metabolism. And in fact, if we're not paying attention to those are also eroding a healthy metabolism. So we can't really talk about metabolic health without talking about certain lifestyle strategies that can have a significant impact.
This is Fat Science, a podcast dedicated to the science of why we get fat. No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional medical advice.
I'm Dr. Emily Cooper. I've been treating patients with metabolic issues for over 25 years. I'm on a mission to raise awareness about metabolic dysfunction and why diets don't work.
Hi, I'm Andrea Taylor. I've been fat, very fat, chubby, morbidly obese, and done almost every diet ever invented. They all worked until they didn't. I've known Dr. Cooper forever, but when I became her patient and we learned metabolism was the real problem, wow, everything changed, and I've never been healthier.
And I'm Mark Wright. It's time for Fat Science.
Wait, does this podcast make me look fat?
Welcome to Fat Science. I'm Mark Wright, along with Andrea Taylor and Dr. Emily Cooper, who just happen to be two of my favorite people.
Oh, that's so
If we're going to be honest, which I think we should be on a podcast.
Yep, we have
I never lie. I'm not a good liar because then I would have to remember what I lied about, and I'm not good at that.
You have always been like the opposite of somebody who doesn't shoot straight. That's what we love about you, Andrea. You shoot straight every time. Okay, so last week we covered 6 through 10 of these top 10 things. We started out at number 10, know your key numbers and get a workup. Number 9, physical activity. Number 8, stress. Number 7, gut health. Number 6, substances. So we're going to do 5 through 1 today to round out the top 10 positive things that we can do for our metabolism, because as we said last week, our metabolism is our friend and we should treat it like one. Don't be that bad friend. Okay.
Number 5.
Number 5. This, Dr. Cooper, is something you've talked about from the beginning, but I feel like people are not looking at you with such confusion now when it comes to endocrine disruptors.
Right.
If people have not heard the phrase, explain why they're so important when it comes to metabolic health.
They're really important, and they're nicknamed EDCs or MDCs, endocrine disrupting chemicals or metabolic disrupting chemicals, and they're everywhere. And we've known for many years, probably nearly 100 years, that these chemicals in our environment can alter our hormone profiles. And they do it by kind of mimicking our hormones in a way. And so one of the concerns with our exposures is that it's just so widespread. And it's really always overlooked. How often do you hear about endocrine disruptors in conversations about obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease? And we're just not hearing it enough. And our society doesn't really hold manufacturers accountable for putting chemicals in products and leading to widespread exposure. And so it is something that we really need to be aware of. And many studies have shown particularly children can be impacted if their levels are elevated, or women during pregnancy, or men preconception. If we're exposed to these chemicals, it actually alters our gene expression. And then that would cause the genes that we pass on to the next generation to also be altered, favoring metabolic dysfunction in many cases. And so some of these common chemicals are things you've heard of, like BPA. And BPA is something that's in plastic bottles and plastic containers. It's the lining of cans. But a lot of manufacturers caught on to the fact that people are aware of it. So then they started to say, this is BPA free. But then we find out that they use something else called BPS. And the BPS is just as damaging. So they're kind of skirting around with this marketing bait and switch stuff. So I think we have to be much more careful about our exposures. And one of the problems is these chemicals, there's no safe level. So that's kind of alarming because as you go down on the exposure range, if you have very tiny exposures, it's thought that they actually have more power in our body to alter our hormones because then our body can't tell the difference between our own hormones, which have a very tiny amount in our bloodstream, versus the actual foreign chemical that we're exposed to. So if we have really massive levels or really tiny levels, it's thought to be toxic on either side of that. So where do we want to be? Somewhere in the middle. So anyway, it's very frustrating. You can't eliminate them anyway. So you could try as hard as you could, and there would be no way that you're going to eliminate these because they're in our environment, in the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, the packaging. Our computers give off chemicals, our TVs give off chemicals. So we're just inundated in this chemical soup. So if we try to make efforts to limit them, at least we won't be in the high exposure range. And it's not likely we're going to get down into this like microscopic, like tiny, tiny, minute level where it could be more toxic. So I think making an effort to reduce some of the common areas that we're exposed. I have to say cosmetics are like really a big area where our exposures are. And so Mark, when you were in TV and you had to put all that gunk on and some of the episodes that I went on, I was like, whoa, what are you doing? They'd spray you with all this stuff. And yeah, that is just not good hormonally. So looking at things from cosmetics to fragrances, anything that says the word fragrance, that means that there's usually a plastic particles in there that are helping disperse the scent through the air. Air fresheners that you plug in, the new car smell, upholstery, everything kind of off gases some of these toxic chemicals. And so when we're purchasing products, we want to look and see if they have been tested and if there's any information about what you're really about to bring into your home. So certain areas are kind of obvious, like when you're remodeling, to limit the chemical exposure there. And also some things are obvious if you buy food that, I mean, I've seen even people try to microwave things in styrofoam cups, drinks. And so obviously that's not good because when you heat containers up, whatever the chemicals are in that container start leaching into that food supply. So
and it's so common these days. I just bought some soup the other day, and it said to peel off the plastic top and heat it in the plastic tub.
Yes, yeah.
In the microwave.
Right. Yeah, you'll see foods like that and packages of vegetables where they say just stick this whole package into the microwave, a plastic package. Just don't do that. Just take it out of whatever the packaging is, put it in just a normal Pyrex or, microwave safe dish and heat it up that way. Even if it's a frozen meal, remove it from the container. You're not removing all of it because most likely it was hot when it went in the container, but you don't want to reheat it in that container.
Yeah.
And so being much more aware, especially when it comes to children and their exposures, because remember, children put everything in their mouth, young kids. So if they have plastic toys or even sometimes their toys and their little fake jewelry contains heavy metals, even lead and other things. And so make sure that you're really looking at their exposures and keeping them away from some of these things as well.
We have to move on to the next one, but you have given a website in the past, Dr. Cooper, where people can look up some of these endocrine disruptors.
Yeah, there's one called EWG.org, environmentalworkinggroup.org, and they do have an app. It's called the Healthy Living app, and it can scan barcodes of products and help guide you. The one thing I'd watch out for is if they try to give you nutrition advice, avoid that because some of it is maybe not grounded. But the chemical exposures, that's good. And there's another website called the Toxic Free Future, which is a Washington-based nonprofit that would be good to look at. Other areas to think about that are also common areas of exposure are like things like those pizza boxes and the wrappers when you go to a fast food place. I don't know if you can ask them, just give me here's my container, just put it in here and don't put it in that wrapper, which leaches chemicals into the food supply.
Oh, interesting. Andrea, you've changed some habits. You drink from a metal sippy cup now, don't you, instead of the plastic?
Yeah, I don't like plastic cups anyway because I don't like how they make things taste. But when I don't do plastic containers for my food, because I realized that's terrible. So I switched to all glass, for leftovers and stuff like that. And if I bring food home from a restaurant and they don't have the cardboardy ones, I just take it out and put it in the glass when I come home.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, we're going to move on to number 4, nutrition for health, not weight loss.
Very important.
We've talked about fueling and fueling for life. I think that's the number one thing that people ask me, Dr. Cooper, when I talk about the fact that I've seen you for a dozen years. They say, "Oh, do they have you on a special diet?"
A
And I'm like,
diet. What's your diet?
Yeah,
Does she
what's the
give you a
diet?
diet?
So give us a baseline, Dr. Cooper. When it comes to nutrition, what's the proper way we should look at nutrition?
I think it's true. We have to kind of flip the script and think of it more as fuel for our body, a very positive, healthy relationship with the food because it's giving us energy, it's giving us health. And instead of kind of an antagonistic, fearful feeling towards food. So that would be the first thing is like a mindset difference of instead of deprivation focus on fueling and providing your body with enough fuel to live your life to the fullest. And when it comes to weight, we always kind of say, don't play with your food. Like we don't want people to use manipulating their food to reduce calories or restrict carbohydrates, things like that, as a way of forcing their body to lose weight. Because when you do that, that comes with what we call diet backlash, where that weight comes back and then some. And it also exposes you to that issue with weight cycling, which causes increase in visceral fat, which is the fat around their organs and things. So we really mean it. And I've had people say, oh, she doesn't really mean that. She actually means you should be on a diet, but not an extreme diet. That's not what we're talking about. No, we do not want people focusing on calorie counting and carbohydrate counting and portion control and all of those mechanisms that people have been lured into over the years. Because if that really worked, we wouldn't have this obesity epidemic. Everyone can do that. Everyone has done that. How many times? Everyone, I'm sure, listening who has suffered from these problems has tried that numerous times. And it's not that they did it wrong. It's not that there was some other magical way they could have done it that would bring better results. It's just the science doesn't show that works long-term for anyone, really, hardly anyone. Maybe like 2% of people who've tried it. But so it doesn't mean with our nutrition, we want to make it as healthy as we can because we need it for our good health. And that goes for anyone, any size. And we don't want to alter our food intake based on a number on a scale. We want to stay fueled no matter what is going on with our body weight or our glucose levels. We don't want to make food the enemy and the villain in this conversation because it's not. It actually, by eating regularly and eating all the food groups and avoiding the chemical additives, we're keeping our metabolism as strong as it can be. And that's what we want. By taking away the food, now our body's not trusting our food environment and is worried about that we might be starving and starts to slow down our metabolism. And if you have metabolic dysfunction, this is like a chemical perception that's out of proportion to reality. But that's why some people are prone to obesity because they have the genetics for that chemical misperception in their body, and the diets actually just make it worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always tell people that I love food. I'm like, you know me. I love food. I always have loved food. I still do. I eat everything. It may look like I eat smaller meals when we go out. I said, but you don't know. I'll eat like 2 hours later when I get home. I'll eat again and again and again. I probably eat more food now than I did when I was big. And I just keep eating.
Yep. We hear that from a lot of our patients that they're eating more now than they had previously when they were struggling so much.
It's just more healthy eating. It's more thoughtful, and it's eating just with better ideas.
And it's so pervasive when you hear people talk about carbs as the enemy. You know, you'll be out to lunch and I'll have the cheeseburger, hold the bun. And it's like, you know, people don't realize your brain is like 2% of your body weight, but it consumes 20% of the calories that you eat in a day. And Dr. Cooper, what's our brain's favorite food?
It's carbs.
Carbs.
I always talk about this. It's like carbophobia. That's what I always
Yeah,
refer
totally.
to it as. But it's been around for a really long time, this carbophobia, really long time, since the 1700s. So, I mean, again, people have been there, done that. How many times? In various different kind of diets, paleo, Atkins, they're all carbophobia
Right.
diets.
I mean, sometimes I won't eat all the bun on a hamburger because I want to eat more of the hamburger, but it's certainly not because I don't like the bread.
Yeah. And, we've talked about fueling exercise too, Dr. Cooper. You're talking about just a regular cadence to balanced meals throughout the day. But if you're doing any kind of exertion, it's so important, isn't it, to pre-fuel and to post-fuel that exertion.
It really is. And we kind of break it down to there's daily nutrition, which means that regular cadence throughout the day, within an hour of waking, consume a full meal, and then every few hours through the day, alternate these meals and snacks. But then we separate that with sports nutrition, which is an add-on that you need to think about. So if you're a physically active person, you just want to make sure that while you have that baseline daily nutrition going, do you need to add something because you're now adding physical activity? So you might need to add additional fuel depending on the intensity and duration of what you're trying to accomplish physically. You may need to add additional fuel before and after a workout. And if it's long enough, even during the workout, you need to add some fuel. So that would be the sports nutrition. So if our patients are not skilled at the daily nutrition, we usually recommend start with just daily nutrition. Don't start exercising yet. Make sure you have the daily nutrition down for 3 or 4 weeks, and then add in your physical activity, but make sure that you're amping up your nutrition to compensate for that extra activity.
All right, Andrea, take us to number 3.
Number 3 is sleep, and maybe get tested for sleep apnea. So if you have somebody who's a snorer keeping you up at night with the maybe say, get tested. I
And
think
when
you
they
got a
test you,
problem.
when they test you for the sleep apnea, really the common questions are like, do you fall asleep at times during the day?
Dinner.
Dinner, while watching TV, while reading a book. I used to fall asleep. I had sleep apnea so bad. When I was an anchor in Salt Lake City, I would literally have to put my truck into park at stoplights because I fell asleep. Because being on the morning show, I was sleep deprived anyway. But I literally was falling asleep at stoplights. So I would, for safety, put the car in park
Oh my gosh.
at
Wow.
stoplights because I was out. That should have been a red flag.
That should have been a red flag.
I didn't quite pay enough attention to the red flag
You
until
have accidents?
I was diagnosed. But getting tested, Dr. Cooper, is so easy, right, for sleep apnea these days.
Didn't
It
you
really-
have like a little monitor or something, Mark, that they gave you at home?
Yeah, it's a one-night test. Super easy. All you do is put it around your chest, and then there's a little tube that goes to your nose, and it just basically measures how often you stop breathing during the night.
So you didn't have to go to a clinic or anything. You
No,
did
in
it
the
at
old
home.
days, you had to go to this sophisticated room with people
Right.
monitoring you,
And
it's
other people's blankets.
kind of
too.
creepy. And but this is super easy. It's a one-night test. You send the kit back, and then it comes back. And I was probably stopping breathing a couple of times. Well, no, what was it? It was 60.
A lot,
It was
right?
60 times an hour, so about once a minute. I think it
Wow.
was. Yeah, I mean, so think about when your brain cannot get to a restful state. I'm guessing like suffocating to death is a sort of a warning signal in the brain.
Definitely.
So
Yeah.
you're never getting refreshed, really.
Yeah, and it's true. It's much easier to test and screen for sleep apnea these days than it used to be. But sleep apnea is so disruptive if you think about it, because it raises your cortisol levels because of the stress of not getting oxygen. But it also prevents you from getting into a deeper sleep state. And so it affects ghrelin, leptin, all of these metabolic hormones. And it's been shown to raise your blood pressure considerably, raise your insulin levels, your glucose levels. So definitely if you have any of those symptoms of sleep apnea, that would be like headaches during the day or feeling really tired, feel not rested, waking up in the middle of the night gasping for air is a good indicator. You should get tested for sure, because that's something that you don't want to overlook. And sleep apnea can be deadly, actually. I mean, that sounds scary, but it can be deadly, especially if you have a very high body weight, because there's already some pressure on your chest if you have real high body weight that's kind of restricting your lung capacity. And if you add on top of that severe sleep apnea, it can be very risky. So for sure, getting tested for that is important. And when it comes to sleep, it's all about so many things, like the timing of our sleep, the quality of the sleep, the duration of the sleep. All of those factors, make a difference. And so what most sleep professionals say is that we should be falling asleep somewhere between like 9 and 11, definitely before midnight, and not too early, because if we're too early, our circadian rhythm gets a little bit thrown off too. So, but somewhere in that range, 9, 10 o'clock, 11. And then we're ideally supposed to be getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep as adults. But it does vary person to person. Some people need more. Some people can get away with a little less. But for metabolic hormone balancing, usually studies have shown if we get less than 7.5 hours, our ghrelin and our leptin don't balance adequately. And if we stay up too long or we have sleep deprivation, our ghrelin levels in the morning are much higher than they would be if we hadn't been deprived of our sleep, and our leptin levels are much lower. So then that also causes our metabolism to slow down for the day, if that were the case. So the timing is important because our body operates on something called the circadian rhythm, where our body has an internal clock. So it knows when it's nighttime, when it's daytime. And you'll see a lot of shift workers have some disruption to their circadian rhythm, and people especially who alter their shift. So say, kind of like you did maybe, Mark, when you were working those really early morning hours, which is the worst time to wake up, was when you had to wake up, wasn't it? Between that 2 and 4 a.m. time
like
frame.
3 in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's bad because that's where our leptin, if we wake up during that time frame, it disrupts our leptin cycle. But if you do that during the week and then on weekends you try to be with the rest of the family on their schedule, that's even worse, like an alternating sleep schedule. If you were permanently shifting your schedule, there's a little bit of wiggle room to alter your circadian rhythm to match that. But in any case, that's one reason why we see a lot more cardiovascular disease, metabolic disease in people that do night shifts and things like that are not on a normal sleep-wake cycle.
What about jet lag?
Yep, jet lag is another factor for sure, but luckily it's temporary.
Temporary,
We
yeah.
can get over it. But if you have professional like pilots, or if you have flight attendants and that's their job, there's a lot that they are dealing with as part of their occupational exposures that is challenging metabolically.
Can you make it up with a nap? Like if you sleep for 5 hours one night, can you make it up with a 2-hour nap?
Well, I don't think we've always been told that you cannot make up for lost sleep.
Really?
Well, we've been told that, but there's some newer research that did show, I mean, in terms of like the damage it does metabolically and how it throws everything off. But there are some new studies that showed if you get 10 hours of sleep for 2 or 3 nights in a row after you have been sleep deprived, that actually does reset the dysfunction that the sleep deprivation caused. That's one thing to consider. You could try to do that. But I think also one of the big obvious things is turn off electronics before you go to bed. All the typical sleep hygiene things do matter. Create a dark room, be relaxed before bed, don't exercise right before bed, don't go to bed hungry, turn off the electronics like an hour before you go to bed. Because if you're looking at that electronic light, it can really throw off your metabolism.
And just like anything else,
Right.
we just have to get to the point where we prioritize what's important in life. And if sleep is important, we should take the necessary action to actually make it a priority. But I have to tell you, I sometimes will keep watching my favorite show and
no Wordle before
one
bed.
more episode. And
I know. I'm so guilty.
sleep is good. All right, let's move on to number 2, Dr. Cooper, body image. This is such an interesting topic because I don't really know anyone who has ever been fully satisfied with their body image. I mean,
Right.
I've had a belly for my pretty much whole life. Well, once I started slowing down my metabolism at about age 28. But why is this such a challenge for us? How
Even
we
fashion
look?
models,
Yeah.
even fashion models, like with the most gorgeous bodies you've ever seen, who I've worked with, they're like, I don't like my legs. My arm is too fat. My stomach protrudes. You're like, where? What? I don't see it.
And now that's
Everybody.
getting into like,
Yeah,
body image perception and just
right. And they're all comparing themselves to every other girl or whatever. But I can't imagine anybody, well, maybe there's a few people that look at themselves and go, I
I look
am
good.
perfect. I look
well, and
great.
who's to blame for this? I mean,
Yeah.
this is our
I
society,
think
our fashion
it's
industry.
it's
Our
endemic. I
Yeah,
think it's just
but
it's never gonna go
it's
away.
also in our culture and some
Yeah.
cultures and not in others. So you have to not speak for the whole entire world because there are places around the world where body size is not seen the same way that it is in our country, and it's not shoved at us constantly as what
Maybe.
the quote
Yeah.
perfect body is supposed to be. That's not what aligns with a lot of other cultures and other places around the world. So much of it is artificially imposed on us. It's not from our own sense of self, it's what society tells us that we're supposed to be. And so there's a lot of problems with that because what society tells us we're supposed to be is actually an unhealthy image. It is not a healthy image. That's why fashion models who are actually at an unhealthy,
Oh, yeah.
low body weight could think that they are too high of a body weight or too large of a size. So obviously, it's not when we're talking about body image, we need to think about the influences that are coming at us and even on a subconscious level and try to kind of counteract those and shove those away as best as possible. And be happy and proud of our bodies and grateful to our bodies for doing everything that they do for us, regardless of our body size, and focusing not so much on that scale number, our clothing size, all of that game, that our society throws at us. And it's really important in families to have this as a part of the fabric of your family communication because one thing that we have noticed and scientists have noticed is that children are very much affected by the parental sense of their own body, the parental perception of their own bodies, and the parental perception of their child's bodies. Even if not a word is said, it is still influencing the child in the
Oh,
family
yeah.
if the parent has a negative perception of their own body or a negative perception of their child's body. And so if you can't help yourself if you have that, but you have to ask yourself, this isn't healthy. Let's try to figure out a better way to see things and a more authentic and honest way to see things. And the other thing is if you take it even further where you're looking in the mirror and you actually make a comment about your body in front of a child, and it's your body you're commenting about, that affects your child's metabolism and your child's sense of self-esteem and your child's sense of their body perception. We have to be so careful about this language. And unfortunately, doctors are guilty of it too. So before you take your child to the doctor, you may want to have a conversation with the doctor and tell the doctor, do not have this type of discussion or commenting in front of my child, and make it very clear where you're coming from with that. We don't want to have the child being lectured about what they're eating and assumptions being made just based on their size. We don't want that child, a discussion of any of those kind of body image related issues at the doctor's office.
Yeah. Because, I mean, how many mothers would look in the mirror and go, oh my God, I look so fat in these pants?
Ugh.
I mean,
It's like the worst thing you can do. And not only does it affect your metabolism in a negative way, because we've talked about how having body image perception like that or dissatisfaction with your body image, how it lowers your leptin levels, raises all your hunger signals, and it facilitates more weight gain. But not only does it do that to you, it does it to the people in your environment that are exposed to you doing that. Because our bodies are part of a community. And so we probably have subconsciously a sense that the food environment is shared in our living space. And so if someone in our community is feeling like they want to reduce their food intake because they're dissatisfied with their body, everyone else in the family feels like that's going to happen to them. And so then their hormones also go into this weight defense mode.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if we're going to be honest, I think we're way harder on ourselves than we are on other people. When I see someone else carrying extra body weight, I don't say, oh, they're fat. I just see them as them. And then when I look at myself sometimes in the mirror, I'm thinking, ugh, I've got that gut still there, a little bit of it. But I think we just need to give ourselves some grace and be good to ourselves the way that we're good to other people. All right. Fake drum roll. Number 1 on the top 10 positive things list that we can do for our metabolism: focus on health and not weight. Mm-hmm. This sounds like a crazy idea, and you've given people the advice to throw away your scale in the past, Dr. Cooper. Mm-hmm. When I'm tempted to look at the scale, I don't. I haven't thrown it away yet, but it's on my to-do list. Why is this so important to focus on health, not weight? Because we always focus on the weight.
Well, it's such a misconception that just because somebody has a larger body that they must be less healthy than someone who has a smaller body. I mean, that is just not true at all. And so having an elevated body weight doesn't mean you're unhealthy, and having a normal weight doesn't mean you are healthy. And so I think, first of all, we want to take the weight component away for a minute and just look at our health and know those numbers that we talked about, know where your health is, know that you're living a lifestyle that is promoting your best health and your best metabolic health. And if your weight is elevated, okay, that's probably a symptom of a metabolic dysfunction, some problem with your metabolic system. So go get that checked out medically and figure out if there's something that you need to do to look further at whether that same metabolic problem is impacting some of your other health parameters. And then also, I mean, there's no reason why, if you have a metabolic dysfunction that's causing a high body weight, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to treat that medically, even if you are healthy. So whether you're healthy or not, it shouldn't really come into play, that discussion of obesity treatment. It should be two separate discussions. I think if we focus on weight as the standard of how we perceive somebody's health, we're totally missing the point. And then that means that people that have a, quote, normal weight are maybe very unhealthy and not being screened properly and not being aware of the fact that they have these health risks, while people that have a high body weight are being singled out and told that they must be unhealthy. And the doctors look for like proof that they're unhealthy. And when they're not unhealthy, they're kind of puzzled. So I just think these two things are so different, and we want to keep our focus on health and less on the weight element.
Yet we still use the BMI, which is just basically dividing your weight into your height, right, Dr. Cooper? We're still using the BMI as a benchmark when all that looks at is your weight as related to your height.
That's right. And the BMI doesn't really tell you much at all about where that weight is. Is it in your organs, or is it just subcutaneous where it doesn't really do any harm? And so I think you could have somebody that's on a kind of a elevated weight range, but not in the obesity range, that does have body fat in their organs. And you could have someone with a very high body weight in the really serious obesity range that doesn't have fat in their organs. So the BMI is just not a good indicator. But of course, we're tied to it medically because everything's wrapped around it in our treatment process and medication authorization and all of that. So it'll be hard to dismantle that.
Andrea, you have lived this amazing journey of starting diets at about 8 or 9 years old, been on 35 diets probably over your lifetime.
Oh, at least that, yeah.
Bariatric surgery, gained and lost and gained and lost. I'm guessing that for many, many years, you stood on the scale and looked at the number.
Oh,
and then that changed at some point, though, right?
Yeah, I do still go on the scale to look at the number because I like a check-in point and I like to see, did it go down? Because I'm so thrilled that it's not going back up. I have to say that does make me happy when I see that it didn't go back up. But I also want to add that in the past couple of years, past 2 years, I guess, I've had 2 friends who are younger than me, in their early 60s, who, if you looked at them, you'd say, oh, those guys are healthy. One is a hiker and one plays tennis a couple of times a week. And those are my two friends who had strokes and who had and are still going through lots of therapy. I mean, they're fine. They're not in vegetative states or anything, but those are the ones. And it's like, wow, you gotta really keep up with this stuff, people. That's why I always say to everybody, are you going to I'm like the nagger. I'm like, do you go to the doctor? Do you know your numbers? What's your A1C? What's your this? It's not just for the chubsters like me. It's for you skinny people too. Because neither one of those guys would you have said, oh, they're definitely going to have a heart attack or stroke. You would not have said that.
Yeah. Well, this has been super helpful. I'm glad that we broke this apart and did the top 10 in 2 separate episodes. But to recap, the top 5 positive things we can do for our metabolism this week. Endocrine disruptors, know what they are, know how to limit your exposure. Nutrition is number 4. Sleep is number 3. Body image is number 2. And number 1, focus on health, not weight. This has been, I feel sort of energized and so much positivity because we've talked about this in ways that I think people can understand and also take action in our daily lives. So often we feel helpless when it comes to, our health outcomes. This is actual stuff we can do that will have a positive impact on our lives. And any final thoughts from either of you?
I would say sometimes it's the little things that make the biggest difference. Seriously, you can get rid of the plastic containers or use them for just a short trip of a leftover, to somebody's house or something, but never, 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 never cook in it. And it's just you don't need those. It's okay. Get rid of them. The glass is easy to find. You can get it cheap. It's okay. Let it go. Let it go.
Let it go.
Yeah.
Dr. Cooper, any final thoughts?
I think I agree with Andrea. Just take these things in stride. Don't expect to change everything overnight. Just one little thing at a time and build on that success.
I love it. All right, thanks you two for another edition of Fat Science.
No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better.
I'm Mark Wright. Thanks for listening to Fat Science with Dr. Emily Cooper. New episodes drop every Monday. If you've enjoyed the conversation, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. This production is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional medical advice. Join us next week for another episode dedicated to the science of why we get fat. No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better.